Heavenly Father, I thank you for your Spirit that comes into our lives when we trust in you. Thank you that Andrea has trusted in you, that she has the Holy Spirit, so that the Holy Spirit is here in this room. And we thank you for that. It is a gift only by grace, through faith, but only by grace, your grace. Thank you for your grace on Andrea's life, and we look forward to what you have for each of us today. Thank you for her. Make her a blessing in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Hello.
Hello.
I feel really super tall, so I'm going to take my shoes off. So there we go. We're getting comfortable. Okay. Thank you all for coming. This is so nice to see faces. We were just talking about how life has changed a lot in 9 months of time, and you kind of get used to being home, and then sometimes it's easier to just stay home. And then when you see everybody, it's like, oh, this is so good. This is what God created us for, right? So we have to push ourselves through that part that's like, just one more episode of Netflix. That's what life's been like for me. Anyway, so a couple things that I want to start us out with. So I don't know what it took you to get here today, but for me, I probably shared this before when I've spoken with you all, but I love to fly. It's like the one time in my life where someone else serves me, someone else has the map. You know, you get into the airplane, your stuff's taken care of, you can go to sleep, you can watch a movie, you can pick whatever movie you want. Like, you know, my phone doesn't ring, and it's wonderful. It's really like, airplane life would be amazing. And right now they have an amazing air circulation system. It's probably the safest place to be in the world. You just stay in an airplane. But I felt like when I was preparing for this trip, that the joy of airplane travel was robbed. Because I have been living in this, coming for this weekend actually was supposed to happen in May. I was supposed to be at this church in Avon in May. And they had to postpone it, obviously, because of COVID. And so every probably 2 or 3 weeks, I've been talking to the organizers, and they're like, okay, we're still on. Okay, did you fill out your Massachusetts medical form? Okay, did you get your COVID test? Okay, and it was this sort of feeling like of dread that until the moment the plane actually took off, I was not going to get here. And so it took like all that joy out of the expectation of a trip. It was like gone for me. And I, as I've been talking about it with some of, especially with my husband, I think a lot of our expectation and things we look forward to have been taken away right now. Like even the expectation of what holidays are supposed to be. Like, you know, I know your governor just, you know, decided that there's only a certain amount of people you can have in your home. And it's like, how do you plan? How do you organize? How do you have good expectation about things that we look forward to? We work hard because we want to go on a vacation. Can't even plan a vacation. I don't know if anyone's looked at hotels.com lately, but it actually stresses me out. I was trying to figure out how to go on a vacation, and you go in there, and then it's like, well, if you want to go to this state, you got to look at all of their COVID policies, and it's got these red warnings, and it's like, and things may not be open, and they may be open right now, but they may not be open in 14 days, and it's like, oh my gosh, and so it's exhausting, and then you just like, oh, can't go on vacation. But anyway, I think that we're all living in that place, and what I want to just invite you to right now is, I don't know what you left, if you had kids that are with babysitters, or if you have people that you were caring for, that you had to leave with another caregiver. But I just want to encourage you to breathe. And if you haven't taken a breath, I did see lots of conversation, but just take a big breath. Just breathe. And then if you could put your heels into the ground, just press them into the ground. And then you can release. And do that as many times as you want, but just that ground is the same ground that our God who put breath of life into us, created from the foundations of the earth. And I believe he is the foundation under this foundation. So if you were feeling at all like, oh my gosh, you don't even know what it took me to get here, and maybe half of it was in your head, that's my problem. Half of it's in my head about getting here. It's not really the actual trip to get here. So I just want to, just one more time, let's just breathe. And then just dig those heels into the ground. And realize that it's the same ground that was here 9 months ago. It just feels like it kind of got shaken. And it continues to get shaken. And I don't want to minimize that, but for right now, we're in a safe place. This is a safe space. And we've already invited the Holy Spirit here, and he is here, and he will be with us. So I believe that our country and our world is in a collective trauma right now. We don't have the research yet, but in about a year, we're going to get all the research about what we're all going through. And I don't know if you know much about brain trauma, but I'm just going to give you a little lesson. This is what I do with my clients. So this is your brain. Okay, I have to tell you a funny story. What did you think of when I said this is your brain? On drugs. Any questions? Yeah. Okay. Minda, I have the funniest story. I was watching a show with my 14-year-old daughter, and the mom, it was hilarious. The mom took a frying pan out and went cracked the egg and said, honey, this is your brain. And I immediately said, this is your brain on drugs. Any questions? And my daughter, JL, looked at me and goes, Mom, how did you know that? I was like, because all through high school, that's what they taught me. Don't do drugs because your brain's going to look like this egg. Anyway, that's really funny. Well, I'm not going to talk about the egg. I'm going to talk about this as our brain. The front right here is your prefrontal cortex. That's the part that, depending on your personality, is the part that organizes your life. And so I like to organize my life in really pretty little file folders. They make and I make the hardest work be in the prettiest folder so that I kind of want to open it, okay? So that's the way I like my life to be organized. Everybody's different. But when things are going well, the file cabinet works beautifully. And everything's in its proper place, right? And it makes sense, and I can find it when I need it. But if something happens to disrupt that, something scary, something hard, something unexpected, I flip my lid. And suddenly I'm in this place in my brain where all I'm doing is surviving. So it's flight, fright, or freeze. That's how I respond. I'm not the only person, it's actually how our bodies are created. And it's what keeps us safe and keeps us alive, right? So when we sense danger, we go, ooh, I should probably run. You know, we don't spend a lot of time getting out the file folder that says that lion has different stripes and it's from a certain desert and this is why we should be worried about it. We just see the lion and we run away, right? And that's what keeps us safe. Well, right now, I feel like all of us are together in this, that maybe our lids aren't flipped, but they're kind of like this. They're kind of halfway. And I think it started in March when we started to get these, different decisions that were made by local and state and national government. And it kept changing. So you just got used to it, and then they changed it again. And you just got used to it, and they changed it again. Or you weren't even used to it, and they changed it again. And so it kept us sort of in this hovering place. And some of us that are really resilient, we were okay. We were hanging in there. Some of us that aren't that resilient and had just really thin threads already because life had been really hard up until this point, and then this happened, we're just been in this survival place. And I just want to, level the playing field to say I think we're all somewhere in that right now. And we might be in it for a while. And I always struggle because when life is hard, I sometimes feel like I'm not doing it right, or I'm not trusting Jesus enough, or somehow spiritually I'm failing. But I'm reminded that Jesus said, there will be trouble in this world, but take heart, because I've overcome the world. And I'd just like to say that every part of what we're doing right now in life that used to be just, in those colored filed folders, real organized, has been disrupted. And so it makes even the littlest things hard. Even going to the grocery store. I drove all the way to work. I work in a school, and it's not even that far, but it was like about 15 minutes. I got there and realized I didn't have a mask, and I couldn't go and do my job, and I had to turn around, drive home, get a mask, and go back. Those are all those things that have disrupted the way that we do life and make it harder. I was I have supervision for my job, and I was talking about just, it's hard, and people are having a hard time, and I'm having a hard time, so how do I help other people when I'm having a hard time? and how do I sit in that? And she said, before COVID, we all had people getting sick. We had cancer treatments. We had death. We had challenges with our children. We had disappointments of all sorts. But now we have this thing that hovers over all of that, along with all that hard stuff continuing to happen. And it's hard. So what we're going to talk about a little bit today is how to keep our lids intact. And we're going to use the story of Jezebel, which is a really fun story because all of you are going to feel great about yourselves when I tell you this story, okay? You're going to feel amazing, because I feel amazing about myself when I hear her story. So we love to have a villain, right? We love to have someone to hate. Why do you think that is? I think it's because, for me, it makes me feel better. Pam's over there, woo, she got a gold star. It makes me feel better when I can feel like, and I don't know if you did this today when you walked in the room, but if there's people you haven't seen in a long time, my terrible habit is, how have I aged compared to them? So I can't tell you how many of my friends decided to completely go gray over COVID. They just decided to not dye their hair anymore. And I keep looking, going, wow, they're brave. I'm just not that brave. And then for me, my job went completely online, and my stress level went through the roof. And so I don't really have an overeating problem. I have a cortisol problem. My body is just not responding to stress well. So I've gained 20 pounds. I think I lost 10 of them. But, you look in your closet and go, what can I wear? And I'm like, nothing. That's really depressing. Those are some of the unfortunate ramifications of COVID. And then it's really hard to get back when your body is in stress also. It's super hard. So we're just going to own that. So, what do? You sort of look around the room and go, okay, who am I doing just a tad better than? So today, and that's just me being honest, I try to work hard at not doing that, but that is my blink thing. So I don't know if anybody's read the book by Malcolm Gladwell called Blink, but we make 35,000 judgments a day. And it's literally in a blink of an eye. It takes about 2 seconds to make a judgment. Most of those judgments are actually for our own health and well-being. They're things that keep us safe. It's like when you get out of the car to put gas in your car, and you look around and go, I don't think this is a good place to be. It's a little too dark. It's a little, creepy. And we get back in the car and we go to a different gas station. Those types of quick judgments. It's really phenomenal, the research he's done, because most of the time our blink reactions are right, which is really a very interesting phenomenon. And so that idea of that flip lid, when we blink and we panic, it's probably something in us saying something about this isn't good. And I think we're all saying that right now. Something about what we're living in right now isn't good. It doesn't feel right. We can't quite figure out how to change it or fix it, but something about it's not right. And our brains are saying, but just get back in control. Just somehow make sense of it. And yet, really, there's a lot of it that can't be made sense of. And so we're sort of in this weird flux place. So let me tell you about somebody who lived with a lot of trauma. I think we're in that trauma place, and I don't know what we each brought into it, but we all had our own trauma stories before we got here, right? So regardless of how much or how little we had worked on those stories, now we're in another overarching trauma over all of those other little things and losses that we've had in our lives. So there was once a little girl. Her name is Jezzy. She was born into a kingdom where her father was the king. She wanted for nothing. The province she lived in was called Phoenicia, and Phoenicia was a booming metropolis. There was great trade there. They had discovered a seashell that could be like ground into a special dye that made a beautiful purple color. And so people came from all around to purchase that, and then therefore trade all sorts of other things. So this little girl is born into this kingdom. She's got a probably great life. Back in the ancient days, she didn't want for food. She's got a beautiful castle to live in. But the traditions in Phoenicia were not to honor the Hebrew God. So in their kingdom, they worshipped all sorts of gods, a pantheon of gods that each of the gods represented something different. And two of the big gods was the god of Baal, which was the god of rain, and then the god of Asherah, and that was the fertility god and the sex god. So it was very customary that when it was time at a certain age for your child to take and dedicate them in the temple, that they were taken to the temple, not dedicated the way we read the Bible, but dedicated probably through sexual acts. So it would be an assumption I think we can make that Jezebel probably was molested once or twice or multiple times in her childhood as she was prepared to carry on the tradition and the religion of her family. And it was probably absolutely expected. So even if it wasn't okay, the culture told her it was okay. This is the way it is for everybody. So she's also groomed in this time to understand how her father's leading and how their country has done so well. And so when she's of age, probably the end of middle school, beginning of high school, her father decides to marry her off, which is very customary. So as a political treaty, she is married to the northern kingdom, to this man named King Ahab. She has no choice in it. She is moved from everything that she would know, everything that she would be familiar with. And she's married to this guy who, if you take the time, and I highly encourage you to read 1 Kings 17 through chapter 21, which we're going to talk about today, he's a spoiled brat. His father was a very accomplished military man. King Omri, if you look at him in the Bible, from the Hebrew perspective, he did more sin than any king had ever done before. If you look at him in history, he accomplished more than any other king did before. He did actually amazing things to make the northern kingdom wealthy. He brought in the worship of other gods to make it easier for people that were coming to trade to stay longer, because they didn't have to miss any of their religious traditions. They could do it. It was easy. It was very progressive. So having Jezebel married to his son was perfect. We've got another area where we're just extending our territory. So let's think about Jezebel. She has learned to be tough. She's been desensitized. She is absolutely probably separated from her body completely at this point. People know of Jezebel as an adult, as a prostitute. Well, how does that happen? It happens by systematically separating us from our bodies so that these things can happen to us. So that's this young lady, and then she marries this guy who, his father was a very, very, very proficient and very effective military man, and I don't know if anybody's grown up in a military home, but I understand they can be fairly rigid. So King Ahab's grown up with a very rigid father, and one who was pretty cutthroat and is always trying to extend their territories. And then Ahab's supposed to take over for him, and then now he's got this woman that I don't think there was any love lost between them, if you read the story. Don't think they loved each other. But they got a lot from each other. She got power, and he had somebody who literally would do all the stuff he didn't have the guts to do. So, as we progress through this story, we've got Jezzy, and now she's a full-fledged Jezebel. She has wielded her power. She has killed off prophets and attempted to kill off prophets. She is the off-with-your-head queen in Alice in Wonderland. This is how she's made her way. And people are afraid of her, and I bet Ahab was too, although it doesn't really say that. I just have a feeling. I would be. I would have been afraid of her, right? So right now, are you guys all feeling really good about yourself? This woman's despicable. She's awful, right? And I'm imagining all of you sitting here have not murdered anybody, let alone hundreds of people, right? So we've got that going for us, right? I have that going for me. I was feeling pretty good. I'm reading the story along and I'm like, well, at least I haven't done that. And then last week I was preparing, and do you know what Jesus said in my head? He doesn't speak audibly to me, but he does these things that are very inconvenient. Because I was feeling great. I was feeling wonderful. I'm like, you know what? I haven't been conniving. I've worked on my story. I'm owning the parts that were hurtful. Things are good. I've certainly never, gone to murdering people because I didn't get my own way. And Jesus said, but did you remember when I walked the earth, I changed the rules and said if you murder someone, or if you have hatred in your heart, it's as if you murdered them? Ouch. Because I was feeling really, really good. My blink reaction is that Jezebel's a lot worse than me, and that's good. That makes me feel good, right? So, we're going to fast forward to Jezebel and Ahab have been married for a while. Ahab's continuing to go out and do these, military maneuvers and what have you. He's still extending their province. And does anybody have a spouse that travels? Maybe? Okay. Or maybe you're the one that travels. Or you did have a spouse that travels. So what was it like? Or, night shift too. This is a good example. What was it like when you got to run your home when your husband wasn't there? It's different, right? You got thumbs up. It's different, right? And the longer they're away, there's a lot of things that are easier because my way's right, people. And everything just sort of is organized and right, and we're a well-oiled machine, and then there's a lot more candy, and there's late movies, and they don't go to bed, and I'm like, what happened? Our house is a crazy mess now. So this is what we can imagine. Jezebel had been running the kingdom because he was off on, Ahab had his armies and he was off and extending their territory. So she's got control of her staff, control of her children, control of the whole kingdom. That feels good. Wouldn't all of us like right now a lot of control? A lot of these little folders that are color-coded and organized and have everything neatly in them. She's got control. And Ahab comes home and he's upset. Things haven't gone the way he wanted them to go. And one of the translations I read, which I think is hilarious, is he rolled over in bed and looked at the wall. Does anybody relate to that? Okay. I relate to that. And I probably do it just as much as other people do it to me. But so she's like, oh, come on. What's going on? And he has looked out the back window of their palace and seen this beautiful vineyard. And he wants it. Now, how many people are on Facebook and how many people have Facebook on their phone? Okay, Facebook is doing a phenomenal, extraordinary job of targeting us for advertising. So how many of you are doing something, it could be incredibly professional, very, part of your job, and all of a sudden, this advertisement comes up, and that purse would just go perfectly with those shoes, and I probably should stop and buy that right now, okay? And you know what? I'm having a bad day anyway. None of my clients are doing anything that I taught them to do. They're all dysregulated, and they're dysregulating me, and I don't get paid enough for this job, so I deserve that purse. Because when that purse comes and I open it up, I'm going to feel so much much better about myself. The outfit's complete. I'm gonna look like $1 million and I'm gonna look better than all of you. And that's what I'm really trying to do, right? So that's what Ahab did. He looked out and he's like, if I just had that vineyard. Now the guy's got like everything. But he's like, if I just had that vineyard, I'd feel great. And this just blue moon I'm having, I'd feel better. So he goes to the owner of the vineyard, Naboth, and offers him. He gives him a sweet deal. He says, I'll give you a ton of money, or I'll give you another property that's even bigger on the outskirts of the city. And Naboth says to him, no, this has been in my family for years. This is our inheritance. I don't know. I'm not going to give it to you. And Ahab actually doesn't really argue with him. He just goes home and he's just even grumpier. And the Bible says he doesn't want to eat. He's refusing everything. So, Jezebel comes in and she's like, are you king or what? What's wrong with you? Snap out of it. Come on. What do you need? And he explains the story. Well, okay, I can solve this problem. I run this kingdom when he's gone, and I do a better job, frankly. Okay, so you just go back to sleep. And so she ends up writing letters, signing his name, sealing them with his seal, and setting up the owner of this vineyard so that he goes to this dinner, and he's accused of blasphemy of the king, and they take him outside, stone him, kill him. Word's brought back to Jezebel, and she goes to Ahab and says, oh, guess what? I got you the vineyard! Don't you feel better now? This makes me feel better. This makes my life so much easier, because you're not grumpy anymore. Again, are you feeling good about yourselves? Because you're all sitting there going, well, I've never done that to my husband. But I do, the things that just kept going through my mind was, yeah, but in what ways do I? In what ways will I try to make someone else happy at the expense of what pleases God? Unfortunately, a lot. And they're always little ways that end up becoming bigger, right? So, in this story, it ends up that Naboth is absolutely blissful, and he goes to visit his new vineyard. And this is another thing that I've been thinking about. So, Naboth doesn't ask a lot of questions. I mean, not Naboth, I'm sorry. Ahab doesn't ask a lot of questions. He just takes it. And I was thinking, that's really interesting. And then I thought, ooh, when do I do that? Because I got what I wanted. I don't really want to know what you did to get me what I wanted. I'll just take what you gave me. And that's what Ahab does. He goes into the vineyard and he's rejoicing and he's got his vineyard and this is, for a moment, right? Because ladies, when the purse comes from Amazon, it's a very fleeting moment that we feel great. And then all the stuff that we still have to deal with is still there, right? Maybe it's more than a fleeting moment, but it's pretty quick, and then we need to get another one, and that's why Facebook's really good at sending us one more thing that'll make us feel good. So he's having this fleeting moment of feeling good, and Elijah shows up. Elijah has been the prophet that has been constantly reminding him that you are not following the right gods. You are following these false gods, and the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is the real God, and if you would obey him and follow him, things would go better. So Elijah shows up, kind of reiterates to Ahab what's happened, and says, so I'm here with the news that you didn't get away with it, and what God says is, not only are you going to pay for it, but your ancestors are going to pay for this. And your kingdom will fall. And what's interesting is, Ahab gets sad about it. Ahab actually, it says, put sackcloth and ashes on. And they said, I think it's the Message, says he put on burlap pajamas. Yeah, I love it. Yeah. No, I mean, he kept himself, and the reason that was done in that custom was to keep you uncomfortable. So that you were confessing, admitting, trying to, in a position to try to make things right. So he actually is like, I think he has like a moment of conscience. Do you think Jezebel did? No. She didn't. So it ends up that Ahab actually, God changes his mind. Ahab says he's sorry, confesses, changes his mind. There are still consequences, and their son ends up with the consequences. But for Ahab, things actually, in the eyes of the Lord, are a little bit better. But Jezebel, she keeps on doing what she was really good at doing. She has not confessed. She has not admitted right or wrong in all of these situations. And she just keeps on in a path. And here's what I love about this story. So has anybody had anybody betray you? Okay. Anybody that was close to you, who you thought that never could happen? When you first gave your heart, your secrets, your life to this person? So I've had that happen. And I have killed them in my head and my heart. Because it hurts so much that you just want that other person to be hurt, right? Hurt or be hurt. And Jesus says, I might as well have done it. You need to confess that, right? So what I love about Jezebel's story, again, it's that villain. I couldn't have thought this up, ladies. Okay, even in my worst moments of where I was like, I just wish you get more wrinkles. I don't know, but you're in this moment with this friend and that's betrayed you, and you're like, I just wish you looked older, and I wish you gained weight, and I wish you whatever, and your clothes would not look good on you. I don't know, whatever those things are that come to your mind. I never, ever, ever imagined my friend sitting in the window talking to another military leader when all of her housekeepers come, push her out of the window, have her trampled by horses and eaten by dogs. I've never, ever, ever dreamed of that, right? So when we take it into our own hands, it's not even as incredible as what God sometimes does. The justice in this story, there was mercy for Ahab and justice for Jezebel. Jezebel was pushed out of the window after all of her servants made her up with her makeup and her hair and her clothes, pushed her out of the window, and the horses trampled her, and the dogs ate her, and there was nothing left. I couldn't make up that story. So whenever I think in my own power, when I'm grabbing a hold of it and thinking, oh, this'll get him. If I just let God do it, he does it so much better than me. But I don't trust him. I think if I just did it, it'd be more efficient, it'd be better. And it usually isn't. It really usually isn't. So at the end of the passage of Scripture, when in 1 Kings 21, there's this little verse that I want to share because it really, for me, it's humbling. It says, there was never a man like Ahab who sold himself to do evil in the eyes of the Lord, urged on by Jezebel, his wife. And it asked me the question, and it's not just your spouse, because I think it could be your children. I think it could be your boss. I think it could be all sorts of other commitments we have. But what are we urging people on to do? Taking justice into our own hands? Doing evil? Making ourselves feel better and more important and others feel small? What are we doing? And we justify it. At least I didn't murder anybody, right? I don't want that verse in the Bible associated with me. And he did more evil in the eyes of the Lord, urged on by his wife, Jezebel. It doesn't have to be a wife thing. It could be any kind of place of leadership that we're in. How are we urging people? How are we pushing them on? Right now, we're in a very unique time because there's so much shame about how you handle COVID, so much right and wrong about it. You wear a mask, you don't wear a mask. I had somebody comment on a Facebook post I had put up where I was with my girls and we all had our masks on because we were at work and we wanted to work. And that was the rules for us to go to work. And there was a whole bunch of shame under my post about why we were posing. And to be completely honest, in the moment we took the picture, we weren't posing. We actually, we were posing, but we were posing because there was this really pretty archway. We were at work in Georgia in July, and we all had to wear masks because those were the rules in order to go to work. So I was like, hey girls, come here, let's take a picture. It's so pretty, and it had all these flowers. And then I got accused of the wrong political view because I had a mask on, and I'm like, you don't even know. I was like at work, and you know what? We work 14 hours a day, and it was 100 degrees, and I didn't want to wear a mask. I did it so that we could get our job done. So right now, what are we urging others onto? And as we think and we meditate on leaving this place in the grounded position with the ground under us and breathing again and figuring out what that means, I think Paul has given us some of the best encouragement. And I'm just going to tell you that I have this thing called COVID brain. And it makes me not be able to remember stuff that I've always been able to remember. So I got all of the awards when I was in Pioneer Girls for memorization. It is gone. It's like right now it's gone. I have to write things down or I can't stay on track. And I know that's because I'm in that trauma brain thing. Very close to flipping my lid a lot of times with just feeling overwhelmed. So I'm going to read it to you. This is from Eugene Peterson's message, and it's Galatians 5:19-23. And I think this is what we're being warned against with the story of Jezebel. It is obvious what kind of life develops out of trying to get your own way all the time. Repetitive, loveless, cheap sex. A stinking accumulation of mental and emotional garbage. Frenzied and joyless grabs for happiness. Trinket gods that coach purse, man. Magic show religion. Paranoid loneliness. Cutthroat competition. All-consuming yet never satisfied wants. A brutal temper. An impotence to love or be loved. Divided homes and divided lives. Small-minded and lopsided pursuits. The vicious habit of depersonalizing everyone into a rival. Uncontrolled addictions and ugly parodies of community. I heard that and I was like, oh my goodness. And that's what I do with Jezebel. Her failing makes me feel better. And it's easy to depersonalize her. And she was around 2,000 years ago, and she got eaten by dogs. But I don't take time to find the compassion to think of what led her to where she was. And the lesson in that for us, I think, is who are we interacting with, and do we truly look at them and think, what's all the baggage they carried into the conversation they're having with me right now? And what is it, how hard is it for them to actually just stand in front of me and talk to me because they're so close to flipping their lid? And if I do that, rather than spending all that time thinking about how I'm better than them, this is what happens. This is what Paul says. But what happens when we live God's way? He brings gifts into our lives much the same way that fruit appears in an orchard. Things like affection for others, exuberance about life, serenity, peace. We develop a willingness to stick with things, a sense of compassion in the heart, and the conviction that a basic holiness permeates things and people, no matter what they do or they believe. They were created in the image of God. We find ourselves involved in loyal commitments, not needing to force our way in life, able to marshal and direct our energies wisely. So Naboth said, I don't want to give you the vineyard because it's my inheritance. It's what the generations upon generations have preserved to give to me, and I want to give it to the next generation. And our stuff and our land and things like that is part of the inheritance we give. But our real inheritance, the foundation under the ground we're standing on, is Jesus Christ. And his kingdom is our inheritance. And he says that it's not grapes in the vineyard that we're going to see, it's fruits of the Spirit that come out of us. And those are love and joy and peace and patience and gentleness and self-control. So what does it look like when we're always hovering here or here, right? With our flip lid? It's not that difficult things aren't going to happen, and it's not that we're not human and things aren't going to trip our triggers. It is. I mean, that we're human. But our job is that the fruit keeps us like this, and we figure it out. So if it is our grumpy husband that rolls over and won't give you an answer and you just want to make it better, the fruit is self-control, that it's not our job to fix that problem. It's our job how we respond, how we show love, how we show joy. It isn't our job, like in the Jezebel story, it's all about false peace. There's no real peace in that home. It's about manipulating things so that we get our own way, and there's a false sense that everything's okay. It's one vineyard away from another grumpy husband. It's not the true peace, and it's not the true satisfaction. So, when stuff happens, and I believe we still don't know who the president is, right? There's stuff happening all the time. And those beautiful phones that have targeted us so well for advertising, they also send us news constantly. Too much information that we can't possibly process and hold. And I think that the thing that God has been putting in me is, in this moment, in this time, for such a time as this, my job is to look like Jesus. And when I look like Jesus, I am together. I am connected. And I don't mean together in like the beautiful, perfect picture. I mean, I'm at peace internally, even if I don't know what the answers are or they're going to be. Because Jesus was yesterday, today, and forever. And Jesus was there with Ahab and Jezebel, and he was there with the people that lived under their ruthless leadership, just as he is today, and as he will be. He's our foundation. He is our king. And the way that we can keep our lids together is to not think we're the king or queen. Not to think that we have to have it all figured out. We just know the person to go to. We know where to go. And I don't do a great job of consistently going back to him because I'm distracted. And my phone gives me something, another God that might possibly make me feel a little bit better. But when he talks to me, when I spend quiet time and he's speaking through his word, the peace is so much better than any of what possessions or things or even like ideas going my way, even ideas in the world going my way. It's not fully right, because in this world we will have trouble. There is trouble, and it is hard, but he has overcome the world. He's beneath us, he's above us, he's around us. I love that the Bible verse that says that God is like a hen covering his chicks, right? And we're his chicks, literally. Exactly. It's a room full of chicks. God's chicks. And he just wants, but we have to go in. If we're running over here and over here and over here, and think about it. Think about what chickens do, Try to get that grain. We have to go under the protective arm and stay there. And right now, I think we have to stay there double time. Because the challenges are real and they're coming at us constantly and it's berating us. And I know that the way that I can tell how I'm doing is that when I look in the mirror, the bags under my eyes, ladies, they could hit the floor. And I keep saying, God, where are you? And he's like, I'm right here, but guess what? You're spending more time doing other stuff than spending time with me. And you're trying to fix it yourself, or you're trying to figure it out. And I think that's the bigger issue I have, trying to figure it out. There's an amazing verse in 1 Corinthians. And it's Paul talking to the Corinthians about being content in the church that's been established there and not looking to the left or the right. But Eugene Peterson writes it like this. He says, and don't be wishing you were someplace else or with someone else. Where you are right now is God's place for you. Live and obey and love right there. And as we took a moment to just ground ourselves and be present today, here, we have to do that in every moment we're in. And believe. I don't know that life's ever going to go back to normal, because now our brains have changed, our lives have changed, and this is part of who we are and part of the narrative of our story. So the wishing we could go back, it won't happen. So all we have is right now. All we have is this moment. It's the only promise of God, is this moment. And what does he tell us to do? Live, obey, love, right where you are. And Galatians talks about the fruit coming out of us: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, and self-control. At the end of that verse, it says, against such things there is no law. You can do it as much as you want. But like the whole verse I read before, that's the stuff we're not supposed to be doing. But he didn't tell you there's a cap on loving, on being gentle, on being patient, on being self-controlled. There isn't. There's no law against it, because we can do it as much as we want. And you know what happens? The light of Jesus inside of us is turned on, and it flows out of us. And whether we're masked or we're not masked, people can see it. They can see there's something different living within us. Because Jesus, as our King, changes everything. And the fruit that's in our vineyard is what he looks like. And he is love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and gentleness and self-control. And if he is living within us, and that's what's flowing out of us, it'll change our communities and our homes and our states and our country and our world. And if there's anything that needs to happen right now, that's what needs to happen. Feet planted on the ground, hands in the air, worshiping the one true God, and Jesus living within us so much it can't be contained. So our faces are bright, and it doesn't matter how big my bags are under my eyes. Because there's a shine and a glow and a light that comes out of us, so that when we're at work or even in the grocery store or wherever we are and people say, how are you okay? And my answer usually is, I'm really not. But Jesus is living within me, and when I'm weak, he is strong. Jesus lives within me, and his light helps me get up in the morning. His light helps me do it one more time. And I just pray that for each of you, wherever it is that you will leave today and go back to, may you not bring false peace, but real peace. And it might mean the other people in your life are still grumpy. But that's God's job. Our job is what light lives within us, and is it bright? And is it flowing? And can people see it? And Paul says, when asked, because they see the light in us, be ready with a word. It's first that they saw it in us, and then we can say, yes, Jesus lives within me, and he's my king. And that's my favorite thing. And how I want to close today, my favorite thing is, it doesn't matter who's in politics anywhere, because Jesus is our king. Jesus is our king. He's the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. He was and is to come. And he lives within me. And he lives within you. And that power changes the world. Read Acts. It changes the world, and we're part of that heritage. We're part of that inheritance of that early church. And the testimony of all of you and what it took you to come today. Some of you, it wasn't as hard as others, but I think it's hard for us to actually take the steps to be in community and be together. The people of God need to get together, encourage each other, so that we keep going and we make a difference in our communities. And when we see each other's faces and we see those lights turned on and we see Jesus in one another, it gives us the energy to keep going. And it changes everything. We're going to be part of history. We already were, but we're going to be. This story, this snapshot, these couple years, it's going to be researched, and there's going to be all kinds of interesting information they're going to discover about it, and we're going to get to say we lived through it. And did we bunker down, and did we cower, and did we make false peace? Or did we stand up and testify that Jesus is our King and he's got us? He's got us. And he's alive. When you read Jezebel's story, and I encourage you to, the gods she followed weren't real. And the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was just as real back then as he is today, and he is alive. Please pray with me. Oh, dear Jesus, thank you so much. Thank you for this verse, this idea to not be wishing we were somewhere else, wishing that life would just go back to the way it used to be, but that we would be present in this moment, in this time, living, obeying, and loving others as you have loved us. God, I just want to ask for an extra measure of your grace and your mercy. I want to ask that all the seeds that are within each of us that you have planted would grow and flower. And that love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and self-control would just flow out of us, God. And I pray that when things push our buttons, when they trip our triggers, when it's easy for our lids to flip, I just pray that you would be so present in us that we would take the step away, that we would pray, that we would dig our heels into the ground and find ourselves again, remembering that you are under us, you are above us, you are around us, that you are God of the universe. And Jesus, I just want to thank you. Thank you that your heart meant that you went to the cross. Thank you that your heart meant that you did stuff I can't imagine for people that betrayed you all the time. And that your heart meant that you were scourged to one stroke away from death before you were hung on a cross to die in an agonizing way. But you didn't stay dead. The third day you rose again. And then you ascended into heaven. And now our inheritance is your kingdom. And we get to live in the light of that story. And I just pray that you would light us up for you, and help us to really remember and embrace the fact that you are King. And I ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. I think the encouragement was to talk outside. So talk outside. Thank you all for having me.